This is an AMI podcast.
Despite the forecast, live like it's spring. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review, where we talk all things audiobooks on this weekly podcast, starting with a quote of the day. My name is Ramia. I'm here with Nisreen Abdelmajid, and we are featuring spring all through the month. So, new beginnings, and of course, the weather, which is why I picked this quote, courtesy of Aamer Khan, who will join us later in the show, and gave us a couple of quotes to choose from this, but I loved this one because the forecast directly correlates with my being, which is a lot to say, but it really does. And in spring, we get some of those up days, some of those down days, but really, no matter what it is, we can enjoy, we can have the sentimentality around spring and what it is, which is just a lot of great resets. So loved this one by Lily Pulitzer, fashion designer and American socialite. And again, shout out to Aamer for sending this one. Now, let's move to the Sela homepage, which we love to take a look at, starting with the featured titles and anything else if they have stuff to share throughout the week. We'd like to share that as well. CELAlibrary.ca. Featured titles for this week and for the last couple of weeks are Daughters of the Deer by Danielle Daniel. This is a historical fiction. We also have Run Towards the Danger by Sarah Polley, Family and Relationships. And the last one of this category is Moonwitch Spider King by Marlon James, a fantasy novel which was greatly appreciated by Wendy Hong, our guest from last week, and just loved talking fantasy with her. So it was wonderful. And now, as we don't have any new announcements on the Sela blog, let's move to what's trending, which is given to us by Nisreen.
Yeah, so audiobooks.com tweeted out this week's hottest releases. So I'll be listing the top 5 here, starting off with Dreamtown by David Baldacci, Death of the Black Widow by J.D. Barker, The Kingdom of Bones, a thriller by James Rollins, Beautiful by Danielle Steele, and the last one I'll mention is The Memory Librarian by Janelle Monáe. So yeah, these are the top 5, but if you want to see the rest of the books, you just go to audiobooks.com for the rest of the list. Lots to go on. And so I went to Indigo yesterday to judge books by their cover, literally, and they are usually very organized when it comes to sectioning by genre and trends. I mean, I saw a full shelf of TikTok trends of books and different types of romances, and there was so many types of sections. It's very specific. And so what I did was I walked around and listed some books that looked interesting for me to listen to. So yeah, I just went to check out the covers and see, because seeing the book physically, I feel like that's what attracts me to the books. I really like feeling the texture of the cover and the different colors. And I mean, we spoke about this before, but I do judge a book by its cover quite literally.
I mean, I can really understand, though. I can't necessarily empathize because I've only been able to have, limited emotional responses to holding books, and that reminds me of like the Goosebumps cover where there was a tactile title. You remember those?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, is that before your time? Anyways.
No.
So that kind of thing. But if it didn't have anything like that, then aside from kind of just flipping through the book and smelling new books, I love that new book smell, I don't really have the emotional responses, but I can totally understand for you to have a 3-dimensional connection to the book, even if you end up listening to it on audio, downloading it on your app, that kind of thing. For a lot of people, especially if you've grown up reading print or just known print, like books to be print, your parents had bookshelves or read to you and you helped turn the page, that kind of thing. It totally evokes something else in you that you honestly can't get just from downloading, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the covers online and seeing the synopsis online is very different when you're seeing it physically. I like seeing the thickness of the book and the pages, and as you said, smelling the new book smell.
Yep.
It's just like getting into a new car. That new car smell, it's very different than seeing it online. But yeah, so I listed a couple of Colleen Hoover's books, and I'm really excited. So Amber suggested All Your
Cool.
Perfects, which I'm gonna start with that. It ends with us.
Nice.
Ugly Love, the cover. I mean, you get that physical texture, tactile texture on the cover, which I love, and Regretting
Mm-hmm.
You. So, as I said, all of
Oh,
these
that's a good
books
one
look
too.
so nice when you're seeing them in person.
Yeah.
So I
And then you can cry all over them when you read
yeah.
them because they will get you emotionally wound up. I, and this it's such an interesting thing that you brought up because I was thinking too, like when somebody says a book is 500 pages, 800 pages, oh, I just got through a 1200 page book. I can't imagine what that is. Even though I'm totally an audiobook listener, I don't read print at all anymore. I can't imagine what that is because as you grew up and you're browsing the library and you're feeling around books, you know what books are or like how long something's going to be and how intense the read is going to be based on the feel of it, right? Holding it in your hand and knowing, oh, this is what an 800 page book is. But now I've completely disconnected from that. I have no clue what a long book is, what a short book is based simply on the page numbers.
But yeah, I like I said, I didn't buy any books. I was just, strolling by Indigo, just seeing what I would love in person, and
Right.
then just making a list on my phone, being like, okay, I'm gonna start reading this or listening to this book and that book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's so interesting that you mentioned that because we disconnected from the length of books and time. Now we just talk about how many hours it would take to listen to a book.
Exactly.
That's the
And you have
difference.
to go digging around. Like, I remember talking to a friend about how long the actual Harry Potter books are and what the longest one, the shortest one, and thinking, I don't know. I at that point wasn't reading physical books anymore,
Mhm.
so I have no clue, and then had to go digging around for the actual
That's
page
so
numbers.
interesting.
Wow, so
Yeah.
cool. Now we're going to get into something that we haven't done in a while, which is ask a friend. In fact, if I remember correctly, this is only the second time in our 34 episodes that we've featured an ask a friend. And it's still a little bit informal because, first of all, we like to dedicate this time to people who recommend an audiobook, someone from the community, a friend or a friend of a friend. And this one is an informal recommendation because it was actually recommended to me. And then I'm taking it and recommending it to you. So, myself, as well as Debbie Williams, who's been on the show quite a while ago, loved this book. And so let's get into it. It's called Didn't See That Coming: Putting Life Back Together When Your World Falls Apart. This is by Rachel Hollis. It was released in 2020, and it's her third book, I believe. And it's really quite a short one, but very, very good. So, fear, grief, loss, betrayal. Rachel Hollis has felt all of these things, and she knows that you have too. Now she takes you to the other side. With her signature humor, heartfelt honesty, and intimate true life stories, author Rachel Hollis shows readers how to seize difficult moments for the learning experiences that they are and the value and growth that they provide. When it comes to the hard seasons of life, the death of a loved one, divorce, loss of a job, transformation seems impossible when grief and uncertainty dominate your days, especially when no one asks to have their future completely rearranged for them. But it is up to you how you come through your pain. You can come through change for the better, having learned and grown, or stuck in place where your identity becomes rooted in what hurt you. To Rachel, a life well lived is full of purpose, focused only on the essentials. This is a small book, as I caveated, about big feelings, inspirational, aspirational, and an anchor that shows that darkness can coexist with the beautiful. So she's also the author of Girl, Wash Your Face and Girl, Stop Apologizing. And I want to go around the table, not as a real pause or play, but just to get the vibe of what you guys think of this book, Aamer and Nisreen. Niz, I'll start with you because you and I have talked a lot about self-development books and how they really catch us. You know, the titles, the concepts, and really the phases and stages of life that you're at. Sometimes things just come to you. And I feel like this book really just came to me when I needed it. And Debbie, with her encouragement for me to check it out. And as short as the book was, I got through it in like a couple days, 2 or 3 days. And it was such a powerful and empowering read for me. I loved the tone of it. And that's a review from me because I've already checked it out. But coming to you, Niz, would you be interested or curious to check out this book?
I would. As much as I like getting into books to escape from reality, I really love the inspirational books, the real life moments books where it discusses real feelings and real life problems. I like getting into that. It makes me reflect on real life situations. So I would be interested. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Amr, coming to you. The complete opposite. You and I don't really have as much self development book talk, so I am genuinely curious about whether you would check out something like this or just the vibe that it brings you.
I would. I think of late, especially in the last few years, authors have been exploring darker topics, but in a very gentle and, really walking you through, holding your hand and sort of making you see the logical steps of how these things works and how to overcome them. There's a few titles that come to mind, but this sounds very similar. We were just earlier talking about Colleen Hoover's
Hmm.
All Your Perfects, and I think this looks like it's along similar lines in terms of walking the reader through some difficult subjects, but without sort of just dumping the reader into a depressive state.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of you mentioned that, the serious topics that come out in books like this and the personal experiences. And honestly, there were very heavy, like you heard me say some of these words, grief, loss of a loved one. They're very heavy things that come up in this that were personal to Rachel, but just the way she shared them, she was definitely leading you into something more and more serious, but doing it in a way, presenting it in a way that makes you feel like you can kind of hold her hand through it, and she was holding ours. So I again thank Debbie for the recommendation and for being able to share it over here. And I do want to check out her other books, Girl, Wash Your Face, Girl, Stop Apologizing. So Rachel Hollis, didn't see that coming, putting life back together when your world falls apart. Now, moving over to you, Amr, the conversations that we have with you at the end of the month, the experiences that you have reading your books. We say the good, the bad, and the ugly are bound to come out when we talk to you. Shout out to you for picking the quote of today as well. And today's theme, springing into Antarctica. You love these kind of titles, right? So it's nice. So because we're featuring spring this month, and last week we focused on fantasy, as I mentioned, you have something different for us to explore today.
Yes, absolutely. Something completely different, actually. We're going the opposite direction of fantasy and going into very much reality. As mentioned earlier, I wasn't quite sure I wanted to pick up a book about Antarctica, especially during the pandemic. And, it's spring, and I wasn't sure about whether I should get into it or not. But I had it on my list from Women's History Month from last year, and I thought it was time I should at least give it a try, and I'm so glad I did. The book turned out to be a gem and absolutely amazing. So I'm really glad I took it on. It's not what I expected in some ways, and in some ways it's exactly what I expected. And I wanted to give our listeners a little bit of an idea of what it's about, and I've asked you to read a quote from the book.
Yes, I will do the honors. The most experienced Antarcticans talk not about conquering the continent, but about surrendering to it. No matter how powerful you believe yourself to be, how good your technology, how rich your invention, Antarctica is always bigger. And if we humans look honestly into this ice mirror and see how small we are, we may learn a humility that is the first step towards wisdom. G. Walker.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ramya. I mean, it's a profound quote, but the book is actually very, very easy to read and is a pleasure to read. And this is, like I said, this is one of the more philosophical or profound quotes. The title of the book I should probably get started with is Antarctica, An Intimate Portrait of a Mysterious Continent by Gabrielle Walker. Just some basics about the book. I mean, it is available on Sela. It is not a short book. It's 13 hours, and it is synthetic speech. In terms of my own classification for books, I would classify this as a bedside read. It's very fascinating, very interesting, but this is obviously not like a suspense thriller where you want to finish it in a day or two and can't stop reading it, and sort of like a page turner. But it's a fantastic look at Antarctica. I mean, most of us, when we think of Antarctica, all we think of is ice and penguins and really, really cold. But this book is completely different. It's, Gabrielle Walker is a scientist. And the way she structured the book is to actually visit all the different research stations she could in Antarctica and see what Antarctica is all about. So she does a fantastic job of not only sort of describing the landscape, but she also describes the different science things that are going on in the station. And the really interesting part to me is the culture and interaction between the people at the stations, as well as with the outside world, as well as with other stations. So there's several stations and countries in Antarctica, and the sheer vast variety of what Antarctica looks like is truly amazing. I mean, from the earlier quote, we saw sort of a nugget of that, but in terms of there's an ice sheet, there are mountains, there are caves, there's underground water. I mean, there's so much to learn from and about Antarctica that it's truly mind-boggling.
I mean, to think that whatever picture we have of Antarctica is just a teeny tiny sliver is huge. And that's the kind of vibe I'm getting right now from you describing your experience having read this.
Yeah. And, and the way she writes is really interesting too. I mean, we started with a rather profound quote, but one of my other favorite quotes of the book is what Antarcticans actually say about themselves, which is, you first come for the adventure. Then you come back for the money, and then you keep coming because you don't fit anywhere else. So it's a bit of a joke, but it goes to that sort of Antarctic culture that you start to develop, and she talks in quite a bit of detail about the type of isolation and camaraderie that goes sort of hand in hand with being on the continent, where if you're there in the winter, you don't get any sunlight. And,
oh my gosh.
During the summer, which is when most people are there doing research and whatever, are there during the summer, which has, almost 24 hours of sunlight.
I mean, I'm down for that.
Yeah.
The isolation, I guess, because as you said, you go back because you can't fit in, right? Wherever else.
Yeah. And I think those are the two things that she talks about in a duality sense. There's such a sense of camaraderie in Antarctica, but you're sort of still very much isolated from the world. And there's different terms and different funny stories she has about these particular phenomenon. I mean, in Antarctica, apparently, when you get more isolated than you can handle and you start doing things that you normally wouldn't do, they call it going toast. And if you get really sort of mean about it, they call you burnt toast. So it's kind of funny, but putting into the context of a pandemic where a lot of us have been inside and not been able to interact with people sort of in real life and in physical parameters, I mean, it really gives a lot of perspective. It really makes you appreciate what we have and what the planet has to offer. Yeah, I mean, I did mention earlier that this was on my list for Women's History Month, and the reason why is because obviously Gabrielle Walker is female, but she also does a great job of featuring sort of the early female pioneers who are in Antarctica or who trailblazed the way for women to be in Antarctica, because that was not allowed at the beginning. The book sort of starts with McMurdo, which is the largest U.S. base and year-round base in Antarctica, which is just at the edge, and some of the research that goes on there. And I think I'll go into some of the science that she talks about too. I mean,
please.
Yeah. Like, I think everybody knows that there is some science that happens in Antarctica, but not really sure what type. And the short answer is all different kinds of all different types. Everything from, diving below the ice shelf to look for, fish with what they discovered have antifreeze in their blood so that they don't freeze like a popsicle in the in the sea ice, to looking for meteorites because it gets stuck in the ice, and obviously that's great for people who want to look for meteorites. And a lot of the astronomy that we know about in terms of planets swapping material in space comes from Antarctica. There's even people drilling for air, so they're drilling in the ice to find air that's like thousands or millions of years old, to see what the pollution levels were like, or see what the atmosphere held, and all those types of things. And this is all being done in the modern age, but
I was going to say, some of this stuff sounds so surreal to me that it sounds like sci-fi. You know what
it
I
really
mean?
does.
Like,
And
yeah.
and she describes the early expeditions too, which makes it even more profound and amazing, right? I mean, she talks about all this modern equipment, and you're drilling hundreds of meters below the ice with these specialized tools, or in the case of the meteors, you're literally just looking with your naked eye. But the early explorers of the later in 1800s and 1900s, she describes the way they used to do it. I mean, even to get to the sort of quote unquote land part of Antarctica, you had to cross hundreds of miles of sheet ice just to start the journey. I mean, in today's modern day and age, you can fly in on a cargo plane, or a helicopter or whatever, and that's how you start your journey. But these guys had to do it with dogs and sleds, and literally just pulling these toboggans along ice. And there's no vegetation, so you have to bring your own food. There's tons in this book that can fascinate you. One of the more poignant points I came across was that all the water in Antarctica is recycled, the liquid water.
Oh.
And very similar to being in space, because it requires so much fuel and heat to melt the snow for water, that they don't invest in that. They actually recycle the water that they have.
It makes you wonder too what that means for the environment, the footprint and all of this stuff compared to other countries, compared to ourselves.
Well, I mean, that's another unique part of Antarctica, is that it's not really owned by any other country.
Right.
So she talks about the Antarctic Treaty, which basically goes over the rules of what you can and can't do in Antarctica. Tourism is also an industry that's coming to Antarctica, and they're strictly regulated in terms of where they can go and what they can do. So the other reason why I really enjoy this book is it's really up to you how long and what you want to do with this book. I mean, you can read this book and just leave it, or you can get interested in a certain aspect of this book, and there's so many resources that you can go to learn more.
Wow.
I mean, every research station she goes to in the book has a website where you can actually see what the scientists are doing. The Australian station actually has a really cool page if you're into multimedia. They actually have sounds of Antarctica, so you can actually go and listen to the different sounds and things that they have listed, like blue whales or a plane or a drill or something.
What's fantastic about this review is that I feel like we touched on a little bit of everything, and still you've made everything a cliffhanger. I just I don't even know where to begin on, even if you don't end up reading this book and just want to go research Antarctica. It's just millions and millions of everything that you could possibly be interested in coming to fruition. Aamer, I hate to do this, but we have like a minute left. Is there one other book you want to tease super quick?
Yes, actually, I wrote a little bit about it. I'm going to try to read it out for you guys in terms of how I felt about the book after reading it. The book gives you an appreciation for being alive. It also gives you a newfound respect for the planet and what we can learn from it. And most of all, I thought it was really reassuring to get a sense of the global community and how we're all connected to each other.
Love it. Thank you so much. That's Aamer Khan, our monthly contributor here on AMI Audiobook Review. He joins us pretty much at the end of the month, and we'll be back for a brand new episode in May. Until we meet you next time, happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.